Okay. Anyway, well, I just want to welcome everyone to this evening's exploration, and a big thanks to Bjorn for stimulating and inspiring the conversation for this evening. And we both felt after, the long period of challenges that we're all facing at the global level in terms of the pandemic, and specifically with regards to our practice of Aikido, but in a larger sense, not just only with regards to our practice of Aikido, but with regards to any practice that we may be engaged with regard in terms of any contemplative or self-developmental practice. How do we engage this practice during this particular period of time? And so we've been discussing it a number of times, and Bjorn and I felt that it would be interesting to kind of open this as a dialogue for us to share collectively. And I think there's a lot here to explore and to discuss on this particular topic. So I'm very inspired. I think it's been a really intense period for me personally, but very positive nonetheless, since the first lockdown in Switzerland, which happened in March, and continuing now, and looking as if this may continue until the beginning of the new year. And really, I think the question is vitally important to be able to kind of consider how do we deepen our practice during this particular period of time, during the pandemic, and during the challenges that we're facing collectively. I don't know, Bjorn, does that cover the territory pretty well? What do you think?
I think yes, and I think we can continue speaking about it, because I think we are speaking from our personal experience, because we now been in here since, what is it, March, April. Right. And I know my experience is very different from my wife's experience, and it's very interesting to see how different people respond differently. And of course, circumstances plays a big part of it. And I don't know about all of us, but I've been very fortunate about the circumstances where I live in the countryside. So I'm finding myself very fortunate, and very, in one way, having the best circumstances for having time off, really, having time off.
Right. I think I resonate with you. I mean, I feel very grateful for where we live out in Switzerland, and having that space around us and the time to kind of take on retreat. And I know there are many people suffering around the planet with regards to the lockdown and the loss of employment, and the difficulty that many people are facing. It's quite extreme in some situations. So I can't say, this is something that that is something that's easily responded to. It's a challenge for many people, and I think we're both very lucky with our life circumstances to be able to kind of have space to process it. But I think there are a number of things, at least in regards to the Aikido and our personal practice along those lines, on things that we can consider and things that we can actually come to terms with, that may give us new perspectives with regards to how do we proceed, how do we engage our practice when we're not able to attend the dojo or not able to be in community, direct link with physical community. And I know that a lot of things have opened up with regards to Zoom and different ways of sharing on different platforms. But this isn't necessarily about that tonight. I think this is more about how we function as individuals and continue to evolve on the practice that we're committed to, despite the fact that we're unable to attend classes at the dojo or be in community with our teachers.
Yes, and if I may just continue this starting, because I think what I found is that because a lot of things changed on the circumstances, which gave a lot of time, at least for me, gave a lot of time to have by myself. So I have to stop going to to work in London, and I had to stop doing a lot of stuff. So there was a lot more time to actually to have by yourself,
Mm.
And also the loss of Aikido in the dojo, you know, especially we that train a lot. It was the physical loss of practicing was like immediate. What we gonna do? What we gonna do? And you can only do so much home practice. But I think everybody actually in this group, I don't know, but we very quickly got on Zoom and help. But what I reflect at is the need for, because then the question came up, the need for practice, the need for physical practice, and what it gives us. So I was thinking that what it gives us has to do with the presence of mind, has to do with our quality of mentality, of how do we view ourselves and the world, regardless of Aikido or regardless of physical practice. So that was always on my mind. Now when we have this challenging time of practice, physical practice or not, and how to respond to that. But it always became a mental heart question about where we are and where do we want to be, and how do we practice that, because that's what I practice in the dojo anyway.
I think you know what you're mentioning is what I would suggest as being the point of reference for each individual who is engaged in an Aikido practice or meditative practice or yoga practice, but specifically, obviously, we're speaking to primarily the Aikido community, but it's not just true only for the Aikido community. And as I know that you are, Bjorn, and there is a transition that I see with regards to people who've committed to their practice for a long period of time, and that they eventually come to a place where they are not everybody reaches this place, but many people, you know, I know you've reached this place. I know there are a number of other teachers that I've good friends with that have reached this place. And that's that place where they become independent in their own relationship to the art completely. It's a place where they give themselves permission to become independent in the way they approach their art, their practice, their path. And oftentimes, what's challenging is that traditionally, we look for our teachers to give us some acknowledgement that you're ready to be independent along this path. So you have my permission to become independent on your path. I recognize you as somebody who's grounded in their path enough that that I no longer need to guide you. I no longer need to facilitate for you. That you have become kind of a source of your own inspiration. So to speak. And now, not many teachers are willing to give that recognition of acknowledgement. But in order to become mature on your path, it's something that you actually have to realize a certain level of independence. Now, traditionally, that is given or is acknowledged when a person has progressed or trained on the path for many, many years. And I've questioned that. I've questioned the validity of that type of approach, in the sense that I think that a person can take responsibility for their own path fairly early on, as they begin the practice, as they begin their commitment to this particular subject. And if they can take a moment and recognize the responsibility and taking permission, or recognize the responsibility for taking an independent stance in their own path, that makes a huge change in the way they relate to the practice, which is a very difficult thing to do. I know that most people don't feel that they have that independence on their own path, or the permission to become independent in their own path. And I know that for me, it took a lot of a huge decision to kind of take that independent stance and take responsibility for that path when I was in Japan. And it was after a number of years of training. And that, I think, is where we are being called to go to when we are faced with having to take responsibility for our own training, because we have no other choice, since we are in isolation, in a lockdown, and we are fundamentally having to progress on our path in an independent fashion. And if we don't have the teachers in the community to help support us, how do we take those steps forward? And that first step, in my mind, is recognizing that we have to become, quote unquote, independent, not necessarily cut off from teachers and community, but independent in our responsibility for progressing on the path that we're walking. I don't know, does that make sense what I'm saying, Bjorn?
I think so, yes.
Because I know that you yourself have taken that level of responsibility. I don't feel that you have moved out of that phase of being a student. I mean, you're still studying with teachers. You still study with Dan Harden. You still study with other Aikido practitioners. But you are fundamentally independent in your own path. Wouldn't you say so?
Yes, yes, definitely in the Aikido sense. But I think we also, probably, maybe we're already in on the same context, but I just want to pass it by everyone that fundamentally, I think what we are wanting to speak about is to share there more or less, I think maybe we're all Aikidoka or maybe not, but we are fundamentally want to speak about the perspective or the spiritual aspect of our practice. So whether that be Aikido or something else, or whether you don't have a practice at all, because I want to, in one way, include everybody into the inquiry, in the sense of, and I have to self-refer to my own sense of when Aikido in one way was taken away from us. And it is how much is Aikido bound to my spiritual path or whatever practice that you do? And how can I respond to these changing circumstances? Maybe with the loss of Aikido. I don't know how all of you managed to continue your practice or if you just took a break. But regardless of practicing or not, I'm have this wanting to be able to kind of highlight and pinpoint and point to the perspective that we are actually wanting to speak about and share. And this is very much the perspective that I actually share when I practice Aikido. When I teach Aikido or when I practice Aikido, it is that perspective. But that perspective carries with me and carries with us when we step off the mat. And I think these dialogues are the perfect platform to kind of investigate that and have a look at that. And why that is important is because that's going to be the basis of our continued practice, if you may, practice or investigation or inquiry into your own event and what's going on. In the biggest sense and in the smaller sense.
Sure, I think in the biggest sense, and as the question of the talk is, how do you deepen your practice during the pandemic? And what I hear you saying in terms of connecting with something very fundamental within your practice and being able to come into contact with it. For me, that fundamental nature is come into contact when you give yourself, when you confront that you're going to be the one that has to do it. You can't rely, you can't go to the dojo, you can't go to your teacher, you can't go hang out and train and listen to practice a particular technique. You can't follow any longer because those avenues are no longer there for you. So you have to, in a way, you have to kind of do it yourself, which is exactly what O-sensei was confronted with at a certain point in his time. That all great teachers were confronted with when they created their own practice. They were creating the practice. They were sitting there going, I feel an impulse to do something different, which has not been done before. You know, Sensei was saying, I feel an impulse to practice in a different way than I've ever practiced before. And I can't rely on my teacher, Takeda. I can't rely on my other teachers. I can't rely on any other person. I have to do it myself. And at the beginning of yoga or meditation, all great teachers, whether it's Bodhidharma or Patanjali or any innovator, any creator of a particular practice, finally in the end took responsibility for taking that step forward into an unknown space for themselves. And that's how their art was created, that they had the courage to step forward into the unknown and take the responsibility for exploring that, not because their teacher said so, not because they were involved in a class, not because they were following a technique, but because they felt an impulse from within to move into a new space for themselves. And now we're all in that space where we're like going, well, okay, I can't go to the dojo, I can't hang out with my teachers, I can't practice what I've done, but I know the path in front of me. I know the path that I'm on. I can feel it, I'm on it. But how do I progress? How do I progress on my path when there's no teacher to tell me what exercise to do? How do I progress on my path when there's no class for me to follow? Either I quit, or I take a break, or I complain, or I do this, or I do that, or I spin around in a circle, or I say, okay, well, I guess it's up to me. I guess it's up to me. I have to figure it out. Which is where O-sensei was when he created Aikido, which is where every innovator, every spiritual visionary was when they took that step on their practice. They said, it's up to me. Now, I'm not suggesting you create a new martial art, but I'm suggesting that in order for us to progress on our path, it's not going to happen until you go, I guess it's up to me. And when I finally take responsibility for that, then I'm not looking for any more necessarily. I mean, Zoom classes are fine, reading is fine, you know, doing all these other things are fine. But if I want to deepen the practice for myself, it's up to me, it's up to you. No one else is going to do it for you. You have to do it for yourself. And what does that mean? That means you have to kind of hit that wall and say, shit, I don't know. I don't know. What is it? So what's important for me? If I don't know what's important for me, what's my ground? What's the most valuable understanding? What's the deepest understanding I have about the art that I'm in? And that's where you start. Okay, if that's the deepest understanding, what's deeper than that? If that's the depth of my practice, what's deeper than that? If that's the breadth of my practice, what's wider than that? How do I progress? And he's like, well, I can't progress. I'm a beginner. You know, I don't have the right to ask these questions. That's bullshit. That's the old traditional hierarchical sense that no, you can't ask these questions until you're a fourth dan or fifth dan or a sixth dan in the art. That's ridiculous. No one's going to give you permission to ask these questions. I guarantee you, I've never come across it in any art, actually, to tell you the truth. Originally, the idea is that your teacher gives you permission, but really, in the end, nobody does. You have to access that permission within yourself. And now, this is the best time to do it because you have no other choice. If you don't access it now, when are you going to access it? Because if you want to progress and you want to move forward, you've got to take that step for yourself now. We have to take that step for ourselves now. And that means independently relying to the best, with all humility, recognizing we're not the end all and be all of Aikido, but that we can take that step, whether it's Aikido, whether it's meditation, whether it's yoga, whether it's whatever practice that you happen to be involved in, that you have to take that step for yourself with humility. Still available to the world around us, still available to the teachers that we interact with, still available to the community that we're a part of, but no longer waiting for somebody to tell us what the next step is. And I think that's where most people are struggling because they can't go to class, they can't be with their teachers, they're going, I don't know the next step. What am I supposed to do? I guess I'm going to copy somebody else's movements on the computer screen, but that's so terribly unsatisfying. It's, we're kind of keeping the pot boiling at a low level, but we're not progressing. We're not deepening. But if we could deepen, it means that you have to fundamentally take the bull by the horns. You have to take responsibility for the practice, and you have to start asking these hard questions for yourself. And then taking a step in that direction for yourself, and you might surprise yourself. And this, I think, is where I've come across that without the practice. And I think for many Aikido teachers, and I suspect Bjorn has felt this way, and Ray, you've probably felt this way, and other teachers have felt this way. It's like, wow, who am I if I'm not teaching? If I'm not in the dojo and I'm not teaching, who am I? Which is a great question to ask. Because if our identity is locked into being a dojo, an Aikido teacher, it's actually not really grounded. Because if you take that away, and that's your identity, then we're really, really lost. And that goes back to the spiritual question that Bjorn was pointing out. Who am I? When these things are taken away, who am I? And that brings us back down to the most fundamental level and experience of who we are, which is the essential nature of all spiritual practice, whether it's Aikido, meditation, yoga, is the coming into the direct contact with the reality of our experience and being able to abide there as that, without the structures that we normally hold on to for security and safety, which are now removed because of the pandemic. We can't plan the future. We can't do our regular practice. We are fundamentally in the moment where we are having to address the fact that we don't know what we're going to do, which is really the place where all of these arts were born. They were all born in the midst of some individual facing the fundamental unknowable nature of life itself and coming to terms with that and actually creating a vision from that. I don't mean to jump in there, Bjorn, but I think you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot. I just need to inform everybody that after in 7-8 minutes, we need to restart the program because 40 minutes is going to be up, and we're just going to restart it on the same ID number and the same password. So when we shut down, I let you know a minute before. Then we just restart and we go on. But Patrick, if you don't mind, I'm really interested to see, because we are a relatively small group, and I would love to check in with everybody to see where do you stand with the lockdown, with the isolation, with the change of circumstances, and maybe you've been affected by COVID more than others. You know, there are a lot of people suffering out there. So I just want to do a little check-in and maybe take to feel what you have to share your experience, not for an extended period of time, but you know, if you have any questions or something that you want to tell us, please open your microphone and join us. Subhash.
My notifications are going a little bit crazy here. I'm trying to turn them off here.
Subhash,
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Hopefully, everyone can hear me. I think Patrick-san, your comments are absolutely spot on, and I think it's actually quite refreshing to hear. So so thank you for that. And certainly your point about well, two particular points about how we become self-sufficient enough at whatever stage of our Aikido journey is, and I think perhaps the role of the seasoned instructors such as yourself, I guess that role is to help us become self-sufficient, that we can think for ourselves beyond the fairly prescriptive structure that we have.
Right.
And over the course of the summer, I think during the lockdown, Sensei Bjorn's instructions and classes have actually helped significantly, as well as helping me think about, in addition to, shall we say, the mechanics of Aikido, was to think more about the art aspects of the Aikido. In other words, coming from an engineering and science background myself, I constantly am thinking about, in the absence of asking the instructor specifically, you know, why are we doing this particular section in a particular way, I'm trying to dive in terms of an engineering mindset as to what would be more optimistic, optimal in a particular move, for example. So I found myself, I guess, reverted back to my faculties around what I think would make sense. Now, obviously, I want to verify with, and hopefully in the future we will. But at least for me, at my stage, it really did help for me to keep going. And it may not be absolutely the right path, but it's generally the right direction. And that gave me confidence to think more about the yoga, the meditation, and then thinking about other aspects of what would have been partner practices. So with that kind of broad context in mind, I don't know whether this session or other future sessions, we could really think about, shall we say, helping us to think on a broader framework that we can take away ourselves and individually progress. In other words, that would give us a lot more confidence for us to, as you say, become more self-sufficient.
You know, what you're saying is I resonate with very much. And I think, because you started with, okay, why, you know, you asked the teacher, why am I practicing the technique in this way? And then you said, okay, I got to become a little bit more self-sufficient. So I'm asking why am I, what was the second question? Why am I doing it to optimize? There was something about an optimization of your experience.
Yeah, for example, mechanics, and if we're in a martial aspect, and you know how we'd be defending a particular attack and so forth, and here are the roots and the rationale behind why it makes sense to do it like this and not like that.
So what I would say, and this would, I think, connect with what Bjorn was saying about the spiritual nature of the art, is to take it deeper than that, and to fundamentally address the reason why you're practicing Aikido in the first place. What is what's driving you, right? What is it that you are trying to discover within yourself as yourself in relationship to the world? What the hell is driving you to practice Aikido? And you know, is it just curiosity? Is it a desire to become a a reborn samurai? What is it that is driving you to this practice? And I think this is when things become very fertile, is when things start really going, holy shit. And you start addressing the reality of it and also the fantasy of it. And you start addressing the things that maybe that have been unconscious to your system, and those things which are wanting to become more conscious to your system. And you start really confronting yourself about who you are and what you're involved with. And I think this is essential for anybody to become independent in their own path, is to really ask themselves, okay, so why am I doing this? And to stay open for that answer to come up, and then for that answer to change and to evolve over time, because it will. It'll continue to bring up deeper and deeper levels of your own experience to light. And sometimes those answers are not going to be comfortable.
Right.
Sometimes those answers are going to be uncomfortable, and we have to be willing to bear that as we go through this process of really addressing, what the hell am I doing? Why am I here? And the more we can face that at a really in an authentic way, the greater our path will deepen and mature, and the faster it'll grow and evolve. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
It does. It does indeed, actually. So it more not Aikido is a means to a particular end. What that your why, and what is that why? And
Exactly.
is that why? Shall we say fired up enough to take you further down your journey?
Right, right. So in a way, it's about going deeper in, and really, as instead of getting involved in the mechanics or even in the principles, really going down to the perspectives of what is it that draws me into the art, I think is a very fertile ground to explore. So I agree with you completely about the direction of where this could be. Bjorn,
Yeah.
you want to jump in?
Yes, we will have to shut down and restart it. So if you just, we will have to shut it down and restart. We will be back in a minute. Yes, and we can just continue where we left off.
Yeah, please join us. I'd really like to open this conversation for everybody to share as much as they feel inspired.
Right.
Cool. Bjorn, do you want to open for more questions, or what would you like to do?
No, I would love to hear from some other people if you like to share how this period has been for you, especially in regards to your practice and your inquiry, if we may say so. I don't mean to say that you have to be spiritually interested as such, but if you're interested in your own event, in your own life, and your own situation. So we are speaking about the spiritual aspects, and we may call it so, but we can also call it the innermost sense of who we are, and share your experience of it, and how have you been dealing with this time, and how do you view your practice in the light of what we've been speaking about? Renate?
For me, this time has been marked by some additional problem to COVID, because my right arm tends to hurt a lot, my elbow. And now, during the first lockdown, I simply trained a lot of weapons at home, and had some online weapons classes and so on. And I simply kind of went on as good as possible the way I had been walking all the time. But then my arm started to hurt quite a lot, and already before the lockdown, I actually started to question Aikido because of it, and I was a bit disappointed with it. And then now the lockdown came, and they are practicing weapons in the park, 4 of us. But first of all, they mostly do it in the dark, and as I can't see as good as anything in the dark, it doesn't make much sense. And also I've thought, okay, I have to give my arm this chance that I do not that many weapons, because that's what makes it worse, while Taijutsu doesn't. But then I've started really to ask myself, do I want to do Aikido at all? And I know I do want to. And thus I found out that it's about, for me, it's about the combination of spirituality and relationships that I do not want to miss.
Yeah.
And I found out there's two aspects of Aikido. One, it's extremely difficult. I'm still a beginner after 7 years. And I love that it's so difficult because it forces me to be extremely concentrated and extremely mindful concerning everything in the dojo, to be absolutely in the here and now, and to recognize a lot. I can't kind of switch off, not the slightest bit. And I need this push to profit, I guess. That's one reason.
So
And the
Renata,
other reason is that it's about joyful, mindful, sometimes even relationships with less duality than normal in them, and less personal stuff also. So this is what I can still kind of go for.
Renata, you said
At
something.
least the second part,
Renata,
and do it with any relationship.
Renata, you had said something about that the practice pushes you. Where does that push come from?
From the difficulty, because I want to do my best, and I feel if I don't give everything, at best I do something pretty mediocre. And it's a pity for the time, it's a pity for everything. And I've experienced great moments.
Does the push come from someplace outside or someplace inside?
Now, the push comes from inside, but due to what is outside.
Okay.
The push comes from someplace in me.
So does the push that comes from inside of you to step forward in the direction that you want to step, do you absolutely need a dojo for that push to occur?
No, I don't. But it's easier and nicer in the dojo.
Sure, of course, but since the dojo is not available, what are you going to do?
Actually, I've got me another thing pushing me, or no, I am pushing me, because I'm now taking this meditations teachers course with Miles.
Sure.
So you've got something difficult again and
But see,
pushing me, and I've started with soapstone carvings, and so I know to set me some tasks and to push me, because I know what I need.
but this is exactly what I'm saying. That we've used some external practice as a way to push ourselves to evolve into a direction that we feel is positive for us.
Hmm.
To a certain degree, of course, we can, if the dojo's gone, okay, will I start doing my classes online? Or if the online is gone, I start doing something else, and I exchange the external. But you just said yourself that the push comes from inside.
Yeah.
So what would it be like if the push were independent of any externals? If the push were there, regardless of the external situation. What would that be?
I guess that's even that's the prerequisite, kind of. the push is there first, and then I seek for something to apply it to, kind of.
But life is always there. So this is what I'm referring to as that independent state of being, where the push has now brought us just to confront where we're at, and we're no longer looking for the energy for the push externally. We recognize the push is arising internally. And I think this is where the possibility of deepening our practice can come when the externals have gone.
Mm-hmm.
We can, of course, change the externals, as that's not a problem. But to become independent requires that we no longer need the externals in order for the push to be activated.
That's true.
But thank you for sharing that.
Renate, what I heard you say that the thing that you enjoy about Aikido is partly the relationship. Yeah. Yeah, and for me, that's where the crossover for me between the spirit and Aikido, for me, it very, very much relates to the relationship. And that's why I think what I do on mat in the relationship, in the physical relationship, is just reflected in all other relationships. Also the relationship with myself that I have, I can't get away from myself. I have that all the time. So I wake up in the morning and there I am. But so it's this relationship, and I also find this relationship. This is new to me because finding Zoom and finding this dialogue sessions and being able to share with people, I find that being in the similar way to Aikido very satisfactory, because we have this engagement back and forth. We have this meeting and we can speak about things and we can question things and we can inquire into things. So for me, it's not so much about, so I totally am with you with the whole relational thing. And yes, we lost the dojo relationship, that we go to the dojo and meet, which is, I think we all love that so much of the community in the dojo and the relationships we have there. I have tried to keep them going online, but all these events, these opportunities to share, I find so poignant, because for me they highlight the structure of the self, the structure of who we are together in dialogue, in relationship. It's where I think our understanding and our being is revealed. And so it is in Aikido, in the physical practice, like you said, it can be so difficult because we are learning intricate stuff. But it's also difficult because every time you meet a new person, you engage with a new dialogue, you have a new person in front of you who also feels different from time to time. So one person is not the same person every time. So, but I think Patrick, one of this really important point that we actually is coming up for us to deal with this is change, because suddenly change is thrown upon us that we did not choose. And we were, well, hopefully this can be over in a few months and we go back to normal. But I felt really from the beginning, I felt we are not going to go back. We go back to the way things were. We are moving into new territory. We are moving into new ways of interacting and being. And in one way, that's uncertain and insecure and scary to one point, but it's also exciting. It's exciting to leave old ways behind. And so I'm quite excited. I mean, I have the luxury of not being suffered. Me and my close ones are not suffering from COVID, so I can say that with, knock on wood. But I think that's a big part of it, the sharing aspect.
I think with regards to that change you're referring to, Bjorn, and I think this is where in my experience, where Aikido has been very supportive in facing the changes that we're experiencing at the collective level, in the sense that Aikido is designed to respond to an energy which is bigger than us. It's designed to respond to a situation which is, in all fundamental yoga, meditation, all designed to relate to life in a way where we are moving in the right place at the right time, and being in sync with that movement, despite the challenges or the radical changes that we're facing, where most other martial arts are based on either destruction or submission or some form of dominion over the opponent. And that type of approach won't function well in relationship to COVID. You can't destroy COVID. You can't kick its ass. You can't make it submit. If you don't flow with it, if you're not resilient with it, it is going to knock you for a loop, and it's very difficult to get back up unless you can take ukemi, unless you can really be with it. And find your center with an uke that is not going down in ways that you can force it to go down. If we don't find ways to flow with this, we won't be resilient in the face of it. And Aikido is designed, in my experience, Aikido is ideal for accessing a level of resilience in relationship to an uke that is much bigger than we are used to, and much stronger than our own personal resources. So in a way, the perspective of Aikido is really fundamentally kind of designed for situations like this, where people have to find resilience in the face of challenges which are much bigger than we're used to. But as you mentioned before, if there's anybody else who would like to share what their experience has been about over this period of time, this lockdown period, please feel free to raise your hand or your virtual hand, whatever it may be, and we'd love to hear from you.
Catherine?
Yes.
Catherine?
Oh, I think I'm probably coming from a slightly different perspective to most of Aikido, but very little. Couldn't continue for a number of reasons. And also about being self-determining. My path into the spiritual side and the physical side of martial arts had to start being self-taught with meditation, energetic armoring techniques, and strategies for survival due to less than ideal situation, shall we say. And it's only in the last 10, 15 years I've been coming into more formal teaching. It's been really good to see how things link in. What I've discovered for myself, there's a basis for it. People thousands of years ago have worked out how to meditate, how to do Qigong exercises, and arts like Tai Chi and Aikido. And it's lovely seeing how this all fits together. It's definitely something I wanted to go into deeper. And with the COVID as well, you're right, we do have to adapt and flow with it. And I've had COVID and I'm still recovering from it, but it's been an amazing opportunity. If I didn't have it, I work full time and I would have been rushed off my feet because I work for the NHS. But I've had more time in the last 6 months, so over 6 months now, to meditate and go deep into myself than I have ever in my life. So it's been phenomenal changes this last year. And as you were saying, Patrick, going deep inside yourself. it's not been, we've not chosen to put ourselves in this situation. I would have loved to have had all these months off to do things, and I would have been out walking all day because that's what I love to do. But as it is, I can't walk more than about 800 yards at the moment. But I'm grateful for that, because a few months ago I couldn't walk at all. But it's amazing what you can do. I could lie in bed. I couldn't lift my arms off the bed. I didn't have the strength. But I could do very basic Qigong with my elbows resting on the bed. I could visualize my Tai Chi forms and my Qigong forms. And it's a way of finding our own way, maybe not in the traditional formal set steps of learning through a system like Aikido, which I was actually thinking I could get back into in March, or I'll be shortly fit enough to be able to get back into. But that's put on hold for a while. But it's given us an opportunity to reevaluate and think of new ways. And thank you for letting me join the group, because it's really lovely seeing all the people in the similar situations.
You know, Catherine, you're mentioning something that I find is really valuable to recognize, and you're stating it very beautifully, in the sense that, you know, whatever we happen to face ourselves, whatever situation we happen to face ourselves in, or whatever situation we find ourselves in, the possibilities for how we can respond, even when we're faced with being ill or losing a particular capacity, whether it's not being able to go to the dojo or breaking a leg or having COVID, still the possibilities of what I can explore and how I can explore it, and the possibilities of how I can respond in that exploration are still without limit.
Yes.
Still without limit. There's still a limitless terrain, a limitless territory to continue to explore, regardless of maybe the situation that I'm facing, which is in a way a realization of freedom when we come into contact with it, because it means that I still have a limitless capacity to appreciate and explore and learn and evolve in my experience, whatever case that might be. And that's a wonderful and powerful thing to realize. I think that's what you're saying, if I hear you correctly.
Yes. And also, it's not just the physical aspect.
Yes.
That's one of the hardest things. But I've also had a lot of confusion and cognitive problems with it. So I think I had quite a bit of inflammation in my brain to begin with as well. And I couldn't meditate on my own in that time, but I could follow guided meditations. So I spent an awful lot of time listening to some lovely Buddhist monks and did some beautiful meditations and just following along with it. So it's nice to be able to do it on my own again, but there are always different ways of doing things.
Right.
I like what you say about doing with others, though, because for me it's always easier to meditate with other people, in the sense that it's more, I find it very, very, it's like Aikido. You know, part of the joy of Aikido is doing it with other people. I find, and I don't see necessarily that our self-practice is an isolatory practice. For me, it's an inclusive practice, whether somebody is around us or not. So if I have the chance to have the participation in meditation, not necessarily that I follow instruction, but that I meditate with or together with or practice with, has that quality of the relationship, which I, and even when I'm by myself, that's the kind of the quality of inclusivity that I find myself in whether in practice or not, which I find beautiful. And I think what you're saying about dealing with your own COVID, it sounds, wow, that sounds fantastic, that you are actually dealing with it in that kind of manner. And I don't think it's an isolated case. I think actually a lot of people are dealing with it in a beautiful, beautiful manner. But we, of course, many times we hear the worst stories. We hear the horror stories, and people do suffer. But I do also think people like you are actually using the time in a way of looking within and seeing what's going on.
I don't know for anybody else, but I think for myself, and I would like to hear back from other people, what has been in incredible support has been the time spent actually outside in nature. This has been something that has opened up, that for me is, you know, as much as I enjoy being out in nature and spend a lot of time hiking and you know, I live out, you know, I live in the mountains. The dimension of connecting with nature as a support structure for Aikido practice became extraordinarily vital and kind of alive in that sense of feeling that nature was a part of the dialogue and part of the community, so to speak. That community was not only people. The community was the air that we breathe. The community was the ground we stand on. Community was the birds that I could hear in the forest. That community was actually the fundamental, vital fabric of life around me, and that vital fabric of life is something I had overlooked for a long time with regards to that collective support that we feel when we're in the dojo from other people. And so I don't know about you, Bjorn, but for me, the connection with nature has been an incredible support during this lockdown, and being able just to establish a more clear relationship with it has been really helpful.
No, I totally agree. I think that is so beautiful to feel the inclusivity in nature. No, I love to continue that. I'm just aware that Judith have raised a hand, and I'd love to hear from her as well.
Hello. I was very impressed to hear the lady about practicing lying in bed. And I've been able to do that too, sometimes, especially just extending ki. And I was wanting to say it's in many ways been a great opportunity for me this time as well, because I've been ill for a long time, these last 14 years. Pretty much every winter I get too ill to get out of my house much. And I can do Zoom online and do what practice I can with Bjorn pretty much every day, and that is just something that I would not have been able to do before. So there have been great advantages this time, and that we're getting together and reaching out to each other in other ways. I think that was the important things I was wanting to say for now.
Great, thank you. Ivanka.
I think, you know, listening to everyone, and it's really nice to hear everyone speaking. It feels like really almost everyone got from the COVID some type of kick towards the pathway of their evolution in one way or another. And it seems like things really will not, you know, change and go back to what they were. I really like, Patrick, what you said about connecting to nature. I must admit that I never have been a big nature fan. And the ability to go around my house and look at nature and appreciate nature, which I never thought before it's going to be beautiful, because it's not an exotic nature. Or beach, you know, I live in Cambridge, is the River Cam, but to see the beauty of what you surrounds you has truly astounded me, and really change my interest in being in nature very, very, very much, because I never had that interest. And you know, my personal experience during the pandemic was that it really allowed me, I wish I had more time for that, but allowed me to really sink into myself and kind of reach a level of being, of deepening my, not so understanding, but being honest with myself, being honest with what actually are my blockers, are my problems, what do I need to do, you know, and this, you know, because I really dedicated myself to do a lot of yoga, but I also dedicated myself to lose weight a lot, because for me, these were blockers to my Aikido, but not only they were blockers, but I realized that I need to develop love for my body. I need to show more, how should I say, show more mercy, more compassion to the body that we take for granted. And also realize what causes me, you know, what cause, stop that neglecting the things and not being honest about things. So that really allow this type of deepening and realization of things that one doesn't want to admit.
Right. Well, your point, you put your finger exactly on it, Ivanka. It's really, I think this is something that is being experienced at the collective level. And I think it's coming from the COVID-19 has helped bring this to the forefront of our consciousness. Because if you look at COVID-19 as being one of the many different challenges that we're facing at the global level or social level, you know, whether it's the loss of biodiversity or climate change or systemic racism or whatever other challenges we're facing, COVID-19 has brought us to a place where we're realizing that even though we have progressed in our growth as a human society in many different ways, you know, life now is much easier than it was 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. We're on a path which is not fundamentally sustainable. That we are not, that the tools that we have we don't have enough tools to navigate the future challenges that we're facing. So we're looking at how we've been living our life at a collective level, and we realize in a way we're walking a path which is not sustainable for us as a collective society. So then the question is, so what do we need? What do we need in order to make it sustainable, whatever that may be? And of course, those things that we need may occur by getting more technology or more advancement or more new knowledge about particular issues. Maybe we'll get a vaccine, or we'll have a new technological advancement that'll take care of carbon emissions or whatever it may be. But I suspect that the shift in being able to live a sustainable life will not come from more technological advancement. And that if we're looking at discovering a sustainable life, both for ourselves individually and collectively, the first place that comes to my mind was, okay, so if it's not about getting more information, or it's not about getting more knowledge per se, not more detailed techniques or practices, then where do I need to look? And then what came to me was that I have to look at everything I've been ignoring so far. So maybe the information lies in what I have been avoiding. And if we look at what we're avoiding collectively and individually, basically what we're looking at is everything that we've been repressing, ignoring, or fundamentally pushing into what is known in psychological terms into the shadow dimension of who we are, or into in the area of our unconscious or our subconscious understanding of ourselves. And one of the most primary things that we have repressed to a large extent is the intelligence which exists in the body. And being able to access that intelligence, to give it space so it comes up and it is honored, as well as the intelligence, the emotional intelligence, so that the physical intelligence, emotional intelligence, and its relationship to the natural intelligence becomes honored as much as our cognitive intelligence has been honored. And we have honored our cognitive understanding, but we have not really found a way to recognize the value and the importance of the voices that come from our physical intelligence or our emotional intelligence. And these areas have been, to a large extent, kind of denied or repressed. So from what I'm hearing, I think you're accessing that part within yourself, which sounds beautiful. And it sounds, I resonate with you and agree with you completely. That is a very valuable area to open up to and to allow. And it's a big part of where I think we need to go.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think, you know, the downfall of our civilization started when Descartes says, you know, cogito ergo sum. I'm thinking, that's who I am, you know, instead of I feel or I, you know, because it's such an arrogant statement. Because I can tell you as a scientist how little we perceive, you know, on a cognitive level as opposite to how much more our brain processes and puts into intuition. Yes. And we ignore that, or we don't give it the right thing. I mean, Bjorn always, you know, mentions, you know, that I'm a scientist and I think logically, and I always tell him that in my science, I follow my intuition. My brain, my logic follows my intuition, my heart leads the way, and my logic follows and makes certain I understand it. And this is the thing. And I think, you know, I think the virus forces us to slow down. We cannot just be hopping on the plane, you know, every half an hour and going everywhere. We need to slow down and see the beauty inside us, you know, the beauty in our small village, in my small village. I mean, me and my husband spend so much time thinking, you know how distances are different when you walk or when you bike or when you go on a horse, as opposite to when you take a car. You know, I never saw so much beauty around in the river, all the different birds that I never knew that their names. You know, the little ducks crossing the way, the little horses. You know, there's so much beauty there that we didn't see when we were driving our cars.
Right. True. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very well said. Very well said. Thank you.
Alicia.
I just, Patrick, what you were saying about the dojo and then about getting out into nature really resonated with me. You know, I realized I just started to get back into Aikido as the pandemic hit. I went through a bunch of life changes and it was sort of like a refinding of myself. And when we were stuck inside, there became this idea of like, I can't go to the dojo, and that moment of entering the dojo and the feeling of that space and clearing my mind and leaving everything else behind. And it was getting out into nature that, because my apartment had become my office.
Oh yeah.
Let me just break in. We have to, Alicia, please hold that thought, and we're going to restart and come back in a minute. And we just continue. So see you in a minute. We restart, same code, same ID, please.
Alicia, perhaps you could start where you left off.
But I was saying, like, my apartment has become you know, my home and my office and my dojo and everything else. And I was finding I wasn't having that sort of mental separation. And so it was getting out and walking and getting into nature where I was able to find that sort of mental clarity and mental space. And as I went through, you know, lockdown and the pandemic and was able to experience that more and more, it became this fundamental shift of being able to take the physical space that was the dojo and separating the mindset that was the dojo and realizing that I can apply that anywhere in the world. And that connection and that growth has been a huge part of my spiritual journey through this pandemic.
That's great. That's really great. That's really great. You know, that was a big part in Japan. That was a big part of the practice of Aikido. That in the dojo, the Shinto tradition that's infused in Aikido is an animistic shamanic tradition, which is deeply linked with natural, you know, rivers, mountains, trees, you know, sacred spaces in nature. And ironically, it was just only in the pandemic when that I really started to reopen to that in a vital way here. The dojo had been my sacred space. I have sacred spaces in the house. I feel that there's a sacred space within myself. But in nature is extraordinarily beautiful in Switzerland, but I was not taking the moment and making those spaces sacred in nature. And it was only when the pandemic hit that really shifted again for me in the way I think you're speaking about, and has been really beautiful to actually regain or reclaim nature as sacred space for myself as a space to resource, as a base to connect or come home to, come back to myself. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. That's perfect. That's really, really good. I think, you know, we're all talking about those things which help us fundamentally ground ourselves in our own experience in a way that I was referring to before as independent. That if we aren't willing to do that at a level of independence, that we find ourselves lost and there's no place to go, which is in a way, you know, becoming victimized by the situation. And I'm not saying that the situation isn't challenging or difficult, but if we're going to evolve and we lose our external practices, then we have to take responsibility for the process ourselves, and not waiting for someone else to give us permission to do so, because no one's going to do that. We have to take that permission ourselves, so to speak, and being able to do that is a very liberating, extraordinarily liberating practice. It doesn't mean that we don't have more to learn, but it just means that we're no longer waiting for somebody to tell us to move forward, or waiting for somebody's permission to move forward. Bjorn, do you feel like you want to add something to that?
I think Alicia put it beautifully, and Ivanka before then. I thought it was just beautiful, because I can completely relate to that. Walking into the space of the dojo, which has always been a wonderful, wonderful space to walk into, and knowing that that bow that we do, that you can do that. Oh, that is your heart bow. You can walk out on the street and you do that, and suddenly you turn your environment into sacred space, and it's just gorgeous. And so it's sort of like your heart is like, now it's like you're opening the door of your heart, and there's no doorway between your heart and the environment you meet, whether that be in the dojo or outside. But it's beautiful. There's also beautiful discipline involved, which I think the reason why we call it the practice. And because I don't think we can take it for granted. In one aspect, it is what's there when we open our heart to it. But in one way, maybe we need a pandemic for it to hit us in the face, but there's a discipline to it. And I think Aikido practice in itself, like we did in Japan, there's a discipline to practice, to Budo, to Aikido, and there's a discipline to life. And I think it relates maybe, Patrick, to what you were speaking about. Where is that question? Where is that drive coming from within? So it's like a calling to honor life and honor our practice and honor Aikido.
And I think there's that when you say in terms of discipline, I would use the word commitment, which in a way is the same. We're pointing at the same thing. When that push emerges from ourselves, it pushes us to move into new territory and to embrace a new phase of ourselves or a new direction within ourselves. Can we commit to that push itself, or do we need to have some external aspect to make us move forward? And there's so many different ways where we can use the externalities to keep us going. But when those externalities are gone, as they were removed in the pandemic, our availability to go to classes, our availability to practice with other people, even in some situations, our availability even to go further than 200 yards from our apartment. Where are we going to get that? How are we going to function? Where's that energy going to come from? And if we can feel that energy, can we commit to that energy even without the externals being there to help support that? And that's what I would refer to as becoming independent. Independent in your own inspiration. That the source of your inspiration arises from within. And that you're no longer needing the source of inspiration, an external source of inspiration, to continue on your path. That if all the external sources of inspiration are gone, that you still have that internal source of inspiration that supplies you with the energy to move forward in whatever direction that you feel inspired to go to. So, well, we have 5 minutes left. Bjorn, is there something you want to finish with? Is there anybody else that would like to share anything before we say goodnight?
I think it's lovely. What we've been speaking about has been lovely to end with. I think it's a beautiful thing. I think it is a commitment. It's a personal commitment. But when you do that personal commitment, it opens into the community, and it opens up into the dojo, and it opens up into the relationship, which I find that's where we commune, and that's where we meet in this. And that's why, for me, these dialogues are beautiful. As Aikido physical practice is beautiful, because it's like we are speaking about something that is very deeply important to us, individually, collectively. We're speaking about things that are, important to life, and learning how to express it is not. For me, it's a learning process. To learning how do I put words on something that is deeply held within myself, and how do I share that with other people, and don't speak past people, but be able to communicate with people. And part of the lesson that I learned very early on was that in Aikido we can't stand idle by. We have to participate. We can't go, okay, how do you do Aikido? Well, you gotta engage. So part of the practice that also I'm trying to engage with is the dialogue, but it takes that engagement. And I just want to leave that for next time. I just want to leave that as for next time, that the saying, the more the merrier. It works really well. She wants to say hi. I'm sorry. She wants to say hi. So, But that's my end note. So
Well, I just want to say thank you for everybody for being here. Thank you, Bjorn, for making this a reality and getting a chance to explore. This is this theme which is really deep and broad, and I think essential for us. It's very confronting, but if we have the courage to face it, can be a very valuable area to be able to evolve and to thrive with. And I think it will change the way we relate to the physical communities when we get back, when we have the opportunity to be able to practice again. And at least if not anything, we will be much more grateful for that practice than we have been in the past.
right. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you all. Thank you, Bjorn.
Everybody.
All right. Take
Thank
care of
you. Have a
yourselves.
good night.
Okay, you
Good night.
too. All right.
Thank you.
Ciao. Bye, Ray.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Bob.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.